She was my dream woman, until I saw her at my dad's wedding. I'm Alex, 24 years old, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person to fall for someone I shouldn't. I mean, who does that? Who lets themselves get so caught up in someone they know is off limits? But there I was, sitting at my desk in that shiny Chicago office, stealing glances at her, my boss, Elena. She was 38, sharp as a tack, with this confidence that hit you like a wave. Her smile, though, that's what got me. It wasn't just a smile. It was this quiet, knowing thing that made my chest tighten every time I saw it. Every meeting, every late-night project, every time she leaned over my desk to check my work, I felt something I couldn't shake. It wasn't a crush, not some fleeting infatuation. It was deeper, messier, like I was drowning in her presence, and didn't want to come up for air. I'd stay late at the office just to hear her laugh, to catch that spark in her eyes when she talked about her dreams, things like traveling to Greece or collecting old vinyl records. I knew it was wrong. She was my boss, older, way out of my league. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. I'd lie awake at night, replaying every moment, every glance, convincing myself that maybe, just maybe, she saw me the way I saw her. Then came the day that shattered everything. My dad, a widower for years, called me out of the blue. His voice was lighter than I'd heard in forever. "I'm getting married, Alex," he said. "You'll love her. She's incredible." I didn't think much of it. My dad was a workaholic, always buried in his real estate deals, and his relationships never lasted. I figured this was just another fling, some quiet, unremarkable woman who'd fit his predictable life. I showed up to the wedding, half distracted, expecting to shake hands, make small talk, and get out of there. But when I walked into that venue, my world stopped. There she was, Elena. My Elena. Standing at the altar in a white dress, her hand in my dad's. My heart didn't just sink, it broke. The woman I'd spent months obsessing over, the one I'd imagined a future with, was now my stepmother. How do you even process something like that? Every moment I'd spent with her at work, every glance, every laugh, every late-night conversation, felt like a lie. I stood there, frozen, as the room spun around me. But the worst part? She looked at me, just for a second, across the crowded room, and I swear her eyes held something unspoken. Something that said she knew exactly how I felt. And maybe, just maybe, she felt it too. My stomach churned with guilt, desire, and 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. What do you do when the person you love is suddenly family? How do you keep working for her, seeing her every day, knowing she's sleeping in your dad's bed? I was trapped, spiraling, and what happened next only made it worse. Let's rewind a bit, to before my life turned into this mess. I just graduated college, broke as hell, living in a shoebox apartment in Chicago, scraping by on instant noodles and ambition. My dad wasn't much help. We hadn't been close since Mom died when I was 15. He was always distant, consumed by his work, leaving me to figure out life on my own. So when I landed a junior marketing role at this sleek downtown agency, it felt like a lifeline. The pay was mediocre, but the office was all glass and hustle, the kind of place that made you feel like you were on the cusp of something big. I was ready to prove myself, to show the world I wasn't just some kid with a degree and no plan. That's when I met Elena. Day one, she walked into the orientation meeting, and I swear the room shifted. She was the creative director, the kind of person who didn't need to raise her voice to command attention. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and this quiet intensity that made you want to be better, to impress her. She wasn't loud or flashy, but when she spoke, everyone leaned in. She had this way of making you feel seen, like your ideas mattered, even if you were just the new guy. I was hooked from that first moment. At first, it was all professional. I'd present my mock-ups, she'd give feedback, crisp, insightful, always pushing me to think harder. I'd nod, take notes, play the good employee. But then there were these moments, small ones, that started to blur the lines. Late nights at the office, just the two of us, ordering greasy takeout and talking about anything but work. She'd tell me about her love for old jazz records, how she'd spend hours hunting for them in dusty shops. She'd talk about her dream to see Santorini, the way the white buildings glowed against the sea. I'd share dumb stories from college, stupid pranks or late-night study sessions, just to hear her laugh. She'd lean in, her eyes softening, and for those moments, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. I knew I was crossing a line, even if it was just in my head. She was my boss. She was older. And yeah, I'd heard whispers around the office that she was seeing someone, but she never wore a ring, never mentioned a boyfriend. I let myself believe it wasn't serious, that it didn't matter. I let myself imagine more. I'd catch myself daydreaming about asking her out, about what it'd be like to hold her hand, to know her outside those office walls. It was reckless, stupid even, but it felt so real, so undeniable. I'd see her in meetings, commanding the room, and my mind would wander to what it'd be like to be the one she came home to. I was falling, hard, and I didn't care about the consequences. Then came that call from my dad. It was a Sunday, and I was half asleep, scrolling through my phone when he called. "Her name's Elena," he said, his voice almost giddy. "She's incredible. You'll see." I didn't think much of it. My dad had dated on and off since Mom, but it was never serious. I figured I'd show up to the wedding, make nice, and go back to my life. But when I walked into that venue and saw her, Elena, my Elena, standing there in that white dress, her hand in my dad's, everything I'd built in my head came crashing down. The woman I'd spent months falling for was now my stepmother. And that look she gave me, that fleeting, heavy glance, made me wonder if she'd known all along who I was, what I felt. It was like a punch to the gut, leaving me dizzy with guilt and longing. The days after the wedding were pure torture. I went back to work, but the office, once my escape, was now a minefield. Elena was still my boss, still leading meetings, still leaning over my desk to review my designs. But now, every interaction was laced with this sickening mix of guilt and desire. I'd catch her scent, jasmine and something warm, and my mind would spiral back to those late-night talks, the ones where I'd let myself believe she felt something too. Now she was family. My dad's wife. And yet I couldn't stop wanting her. I'd sit in meetings, pretending to focus, while my heart pounded every time she said my name. I'd see her laugh with a coworker, and it'd hit me like a betrayal, even though I had no claim to her. It was irrational, but it was real. I tried to act normal, to keep things professional, but it was impossible. She'd asked me to stay late for a project, and I'd wonder if it was intentional, if she wanted to be alone with me. She'd smile, and I'd search her face for some hint of what she was thinking. Did she know how I felt? Had she always known? The worst part was, she didn't act any different. She was still warm, still professional, still the Elena I'd fallen for. But now, I'd see her at family dinners, sitting next to my dad, her hand on his arm, and it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I'd watch her try to talk to him about art or music, things she loved, and he'd brush it off, more interested in his phone or his latest deal. It made me angry at him for not seeing her, for not appreciating the woman I couldn't stop thinking about. And angry at myself for caring so much, for letting this consume me. I started noticing things, little cracks in their marriage that only made it worse. My dad was 52, set in his ways, always distracted by work. Elena was vibrant, curious, alive in a way he'd never been. At those awkward family dinners, she'd try to share something, a new artist she'd discovered, a book she was reading, and he'd nod absently, already halfway out the door in his mind. I'd catch her glancing at me, like she was looking for someone to actually hear her, to care about the things that made her light up. It was torture, sitting there across from her, pretending I was just her stepson, when all I wanted was to be the one she turned to. I'd go home after those nights and lie awake, replaying every moment, every look, wondering if I was reading too much into it or if there was something real there. One night, about a month after the wedding, things got messy. We were working late on a big campaign pitch, just the two of us in the office. The city lights glowed through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. The air felt heavy, charged, like something was about to break. She was sitting across from me, her sleeves rolled up, hair falling loose from its usual neat bun. We were going over some client feedback, laughing about how ridiculous their demands were, and for a moment, it felt like before the wedding, before everything. Just me and her, the way it used to be. Then she went quiet, her eyes fixed on me, and said, "Alex, you're different lately. What's going on?" My heart slammed against my ribs. This was it, the moment I could tell her everything. How I couldn't stop thinking about her, how it killed me to see her with my dad, how I'd been falling for her since the day we met. The words were right there, burning in my throat, but I froze. "Just stress," I mumbled, looking away. She didn't push, but her eyes lingered, like she knew I was lying. Like she could see right through me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't imagining this. There was something there, something she wasn't saying either. And that realization made everything so much worse. It wasn't just me. There was a spark, a connection, something unspoken hanging between us. But what could I do with that? She was married to my dad. She was my stepmother. The guilt was suffocating, but so was the longing. I was trapped in this impossible space, torn between what I wanted and what I knew was right. The next few weeks were a blur of avoidance and obsession. I'd take on extra projects, bury myself in work, anything to keep my mind off her. But every time I saw her, it was like starting over. I'd overhear her on the phone with my dad, her voice tight, and I'd wonder if they were fighting. I'd see her laugh with a coworker, and this irrational jealousy would flare up, like she was slipping away from me even more. I started questioning everything, my feelings, her marriage, what I even wanted from this. Was I in love with her, or was I just caught up in the forbidden thrill of it all? The more I tried to pull away, the deeper I fell. I'd catch myself staring at her in meetings, memorizing the way her hands moved when she talked, the way her eyes lit up when she got excited about an idea. It was torture, and I was doing it to myself. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a company event, some glitzy client dinner at a rooftop bar downtown. Elena was there, stunning in a black dress that hugged her in all the right places. My dad was on her arm, playing the proud husband, but I could see the tension between them. I kept my distance, nursing a drink at the bar, trying not to stare. But as the night wore on, I noticed them arguing quietly in a corner. My dad's face was hard, his gestures sharp, and Elena just looked tired, defeated. He stormed off, leaving her alone, staring out at the city skyline. I should have stayed away. I knew it. But my feet moved before my brain could stop them. I walked over, my heart pounding, and asked, "You okay?" She looked at me, her eyes raw, unguarded. "I don't know if I made the right choice, Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My breath caught. Was she talking about my dad? About her marriage? About us? I wanted to ask, to push, to know what she meant, but before I could, she reached out and touched my arm. Just for a moment, but it burned, like her hand left a mark on my skin. "You're a good kid," she said, but her voice cracked, like she was trying to convince herself of something. Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my mind racing. I knew I was in too deep, and there was no going back. From that night on, I was a wreck. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. Every interaction with Elena felt like a test. Her words, her glances, the way she'd linger just a second too long when we talked. I started reading into everything, dissecting every moment for some sign that she felt what I did. Was she unhappy with my dad? Was she trying to tell me something? Or was I just projecting, desperate for a reason to keep holding on? I started finding excuses to be around her, volunteering for projects I knew she'd oversee, staying late even when I didn't need to. It was reckless, dangerous, but I couldn't help it. There was this pull, this need to know if I was crazy or if there was something real between us. The more I saw her, the more I noticed the cracks in her marriage. My dad was always working, always distracted, leaving her to fend for herself. I'd visit their house for dinner, awkward, tense affairs where I'd try to act normal, and I'd hear them argue through the walls. Small, sharp fights about time, attention, priorities. She'd want to talk about her day, her passions, and he'd shut her down, too busy or too tired to care. It killed me to see her like that, to know she deserved more, someone who saw her for who she was. And the worst part? I hated myself for thinking I could be that person. I'd lie awake at night, replaying those fights, wondering if she was lying awake too, feeling as trapped as I did. One afternoon, we were working on a tight deadline, holed up in her office. The air was thick with tension, not just from the work, but from everything unsaid. She was frustrated, snapping about a client's impossible demands, her voice sharp but her eyes tired. I made some dumb joke to lighten the mood, something about the client's terrible taste in fonts, and she laughed, really laughed, that warm, unguarded sound I'd fallen for months ago. Then she went quiet, staring at me across the desk. "You always know how to make me smile, Alex," she said softly, her voice like a confession. My heart stopped. It was the kind of thing she'd said before, back when things were simpler, but now, with everything I knew, it felt like more. Like a door opening, just a crack. I wanted to ask her what she meant, to spill everything I'd been holding back, but my throat closed up. I just nodded, my hands shaking, and we went back to work like nothing had happened. But something had. I could feel it. Things started to escalate at home too. My dad, usually oblivious, started noticing how often I was around. One night, after another tense family dinner, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You're spending a lot of time with Elena," he said, his tone sharp, his eyes narrowing. I brushed it off, said it was just work, but he didn't look convinced. Did he suspect something? Did he see the way I looked at her, the way I couldn't help but light up when she was around? The guilt was suffocating, like a weight pressing down on me every time I saw him. But the longing was worse. I was caught in this impossible space, torn between loyalty to my dad and feelings I couldn't control. I'd go home and stare at the ceiling, wondering how I'd let it get this far, wondering if there was any way out that didn't end in disaster. Then came the trip. The agency sent a small team, including me and Elena, to a marketing conference in New York. 3 days, just us and a few coworkers, away from the office, away from my dad. I told myself I'd keep it professional, that I'd lock my feelings away and focus on the work. But the moment we landed, I felt it, that same electric pull that had been there from the start. We'd grab coffee between sessions, talk about everything and nothing, and it was like the wedding had never happened. Just me and her, laughing, sharing stories, the rest of the world fading away. One night, after a long day of panels and networking, we ended up at the hotel bar. The others had gone to bed, and it was just us, the city sparkling outside like it was putting on a show. She was looser, maybe from the wine, maybe from being away from Chicago. She started talking about her life, how she'd always wanted more, how she dreamed of a life full of adventure and passion but had settled for safe, for predictable. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the wrong choice," she said, her eyes locked on mine, her voice soft but heavy. I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. Was she talking about my dad? About her life? About me? The question hung there, unanswered, as she looked away, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. The silence was deafening, stretching on until it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. I wanted to say something, to tell her everything, to ask if she felt the same pull I did. But before I could find the words, she stood up, her expression unreadable. "Good night, Alex," she said, and walked away, leaving me there, my mind a mess of hope and fear. I lay awake that night, replaying her words, her look, wondering if I'd missed my chance, or if I'd just dodged a bullet that would have destroyed us both. Back in Chicago, things got worse. My dad was colder, more distant, like he could sense something was off. Elena was quieter, her smiles rarer, her eyes guarded. And I was unraveling, caught in this cycle of obsession and guilt that I couldn't escape. I started noticing small things. Her brushing past me a little too closely in the office. Her texts about work that felt too personal, too warm. I'd tell myself I was imagining it, that I was seeing what I wanted to see, but deep down, I knew better. There was something there, something neither of us could fully acknowledge. I was losing my grip, and I knew it. I had to make a choice, keep feeding this dangerous, impossible obsession or walk away. But walking away meant losing her, losing the one person who made me feel alive, and I wasn't sure I could do that. It all came crashing down one night at their house. My dad was out of town, and Elena texted me, asking me to come over to help with some work files she couldn't access. It was a flimsy excuse, and I knew it. I should have said no, should have stayed away, but I didn't. When I got there, she was different, nervous, almost vulnerable, her usual confidence replaced by something raw. We fixed the files quickly, but instead of leaving, I stayed. We sat on the couch, a bottle of wine between us, and we talked, really talked, for the first time since the wedding. She told me about her doubts, how she'd rushed into the marriage with my dad, how she felt trapped in a life that didn't feel like hers. Her voice was soft, breaking, and I could see the weight she was carrying. And then, out of nowhere, she looked at me and said, "I see the way you look at me, Alex. I'm not blind." My heart stopped. Time froze. I opened my mouth to deny it, to laugh it off, to say anything to defuse the moment, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, the truth came spilling out. I told her everything, how I'd fallen for her months ago, how I couldn't stop thinking about her, how it killed me to see her with my dad. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but I couldn't hold it back anymore. Her eyes softened, and for one fleeting, heart-stopping moment, I thought she'd say she felt the same. I thought she'd lean in, close the distance, change everything. But then she shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "This can't happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're his son, Alex. You're his son." She asked me to leave, her words gentle but firm, and I did, my chest aching like I'd been punched. The next day, I quit my job. I couldn't keep seeing her, couldn't keep working under her, pretending I was okay. I couldn't keep sitting across from her in meetings, catching her eye, knowing what I knew. I packed up my apartment, moved to a different city, and cut contact with my dad for a while. I needed space, needed to rebuild, needed to figure out who I was without her in my head. But even now, years later, I can't shake her. I wonder if she's happy, if she's still with my dad, if she ever thinks of me. I'll never know if she felt what I did, if those moments we shared were real or just my imagination running wild. All I know is, some loves you can't have, and they're the ones that haunt you forever. They're the ones that keep you up at night, wondering what could have been, what you should have said, what you should have done differently. They're the ones that leave you hollow, carrying a piece of them with you no matter how far you run.